But I want to show you a parallel that we have. First, let me start in Matthew 24:15, and everybody's very familiar with this verse. Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place. Now, this is Jesus speaking, and Jesus tells us to go to Daniel, the book of Daniel, where he is talking about the abomination of desolation, right? So maybe real quick run over here to Daniel 9:27 is where that takes us. And it says here in Daniel, then he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. This is the only reference that we get in the Bible about a final 7-year period, the tribulation. Okay, this is widely known as the 7-year tribulation. 1 week is actually one period of 7 years. And in the middle of the 7 years, he will bring an end to sacrifice and offering. And on the wing of abominations shall be one who makes desolate. This is what Jesus is talking about in Matthew 24:15. So Jesus says, well, just real quick, it says this is the 1 week period. Oops, this is the 1 week period. But in the middle of the week, he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering. Okay. So going back to Matthew, Jesus tells us, it says, when you see this happen, the midpoint, that's the middle. Okay, that's the middle of the week. Let's jump back. It says, but in the middle of the 7-year period, okay, he will bring us an end to sacrifice and offering, and will make an abominations on the wing of abominations and make one who's desolate. Okay, so if this is the case, we understand what Jesus is saying. This is where the middle of the final 7-year period is. Okay. Now, I don't believe that there is a 7-year tribulation period. I believe Daniel tells us that there is a final 7 years, 1 week. It's the last week, the 70th week of Daniel. Okay? This is prophetic. This has not been fulfilled. Well, I think it has. I think we're in the middle of it right now. And it says, in the middle of the week, he will bring an end to sacrifice and offering. Okay? Now, if we move on, then Jesus says, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. He goes on to give some description. But down here it says, for then there will be great tribulation. Okay? So Jesus is saying, when you see the abomination of desolation, the middle of the tribulation, the middle of the final 7 years, I'm going to call it the final 7 years. But it's widely known as the period of 7 years, the tribulation. But I call it the final 7 years. Okay? When you see this happen, flee to the mountains, for then there will be great tribulation, such as not been since the beginning of the world until this time, no nor ever shall be. Did you know that this is Jesus actually quoting Daniel 12? Okay, Jesus already told us to go back to Daniel and look for the abomination of desolation. That's in Daniel 9:27. But Jesus is quoting from the book of Daniel 12 verse 1. Keep the current color scheme. Fine. Okay? So let's go check that out. Let's go look at Daniel 12. Jesus says, at that time, here's what's going on. At that time, Michael shall stand up, the great prince who stands watch over the sons of your people. And there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that time. Okay, so Matthew 24:21, Jesus is taking us back to Daniel 12. For then there will be great tribulation, such as not was since there was the beginning of the world. Okay, now this great tribulation he's talking about, this is the great tribulation. I will tie this back in Luke that this is the day of the Lord. This is the Lord's day. This is when the Lord Jesus is revealed. Okay? To prove that, let me jump over here to Luke. So down here at verse 24, this is Jesus again talking. For as the lightning that flashes out of one part of heaven shines to the other part under heaven, so also the Son of Man will be in his day. This is his day. This is the day of the Lord. Okay, that is when the lightning happens. This is the lightning that flashes from one side of heaven to the other, the twinkling of an eye. So also shall the Son of Man be in his day. I know that this is the twinkling of an eye, and I'll show you why. Back in Matthew, remember, when you see the abomination, the middle of the tribulation, that's the middle of the final 7 years. That's when the abomination happens. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. I'll get to that in a minute. For then there will be great tribulation. Okay? if we take this, if we look, number one, this is Great Tribulation. This is talking about the Lord's Day right here in Luke. This is the Lord, right? He comes twinkling of an eye. That's the day. That's the day he comes here. And then if we jump down, let me just show you one thing real quick. In that day, he who is on the housetop and his goods are in the house, let him not come down to take them away. And likewise, the one who is in the field, let him not turn back. Oh, I'm sorry. I meant to go back here. 29. But on that day, when Lot went out of Sodom, it rained fire and brimstone from heaven and destroyed them all. Even so, it will be in the day when the Son of Man is revealed. Right? If you jump over here to Luke 21, there's so much to cover, and I apologize for jumping around like this. Let's just go right down to verse 20. I'm going to prove to you this. It says right here. Okay, this is Jesus again talking. This is the same thing that Jesus said. This is the same passage, just Luke's interpretation that Matthew is talking about here in Matthew 24. So Luke 21 and Matthew 24 parallel each other, right? It's the same event when Jesus is speaking. And it says here in 20, but when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then know that its desolation is near. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains, right? This is the same thing that Matthew says, only Luke says it differently. But when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then flee to the mountains. Matthew 24 says, therefore when you see the abomination of desolation, then flee to the mountains. Okay? So there's two things. There's two precursors to fleeing to the mountains. One, when you see the abomination that we know happens, according to Daniel 9:27, at the middle of the final 7 years. Then flee to the mountains. Okay? And Luke says, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, flee to the mountains. But notice, right after this, let those who are in the midst of her depart, and let not those who are in the country enter her. For these are the days of vengeance. This is the days of vengeance, the wrath of God, the wrath of the Lamb. This is the Lord's day. But woe to those who are pregnant and to those who are nursing babies in those days, for there will be great distress in the land and wrath upon this people. Okay, this is the Lord's day, the last 3.5 years of the final 7 years, the middle. Remember, this happens at the middle. Okay, we know that because Matthew 24, this happens right before the fleeing. Matthew 24, the abomination happens right before the fleeing also. We know the abomination happens, according to Daniel 9:27, at the middle of the final 7 years. So, we know that this is the Lord's day of wrath. A lot of pre-trib believers will say that we're not supposed to suffer wrath. I firmly agree with them, 100% agree with them. However, they believe in a final 7-year period that the Lord will come back and take us away from. That is not biblical. We will be out of here after, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, the abomination set up, the fleeing in the wilderness. For these are the days of vengeance. Okay, we are out of here the day of vengeance. When that begins. Right here, and it says, and I'll show you, likewise as it was also in the days of Lot. This is back at Luke 17. They ate, they drank, they bought, they sold, they planted and built. But on the day that Lot went out of Sodom, it rained fire and brimstone from heaven and destroyed them all. That's on that very day. If you go back and you look in Genesis where it talks about Lot and Sodom and Gomorrah, Lot asked the angels if they can leave to a different city. And the angel says, yes, but hurry, because we cannot destroy Sodom and Gomorrah until you are safely in that city. So the Lord's telling us here, but when Lot went out of Sodom, it rained fire and brimstone on that day, that very day. But they were protected. They were taken out. Okay? Then it says, even so it will be in the day when the Son of Man is revealed, the revealing of the Son of Man. Now, let me show you something else too. I wasn't going to do this, but I'm going to show you as well. Matthew 24:26 here. For therefore when they say, look, here he is in the desert, do not go out. For as lightning comes from the east and flashes to the west, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. Okay? And then it says here, immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be dark and the moon will not give its light. This is the sixth seal of Revelation. Revelation chapter 6. This is what they're talking about here. This is what Jesus is talking about. Then it says here, then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven. And then all the tribes will mourn. and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. Okay, I mean, there's so much going on here, but it's talking about the exact same event. This is Revelation 6. Okay, this is the very last verse in Revelation 6. And I'm just going to go ahead and pull it up, and I'll show you why. I wasn't going to do this either, but I'm going to show you. I'm going to open a new tab. Revelation 6. Jump down here to the very end, the sixth seal. I looked and he opened the sixth seal, and behold, there was a great earthquake. Okay, the sun became black, the moon became like blood, the stars fell from heaven. I want to talk about this in a minute. Okay, this is also talking about Revelation 12. The stars fall from heaven to the earth. Then the sky receded as a scroll when it was rolled up, and every mountain and island was moved out of its place, and the kings of the earth, the great men, the rich, the commanders, mighty men, every slave and every free, hid themselves in the caves and the rocks of the mountains, and said to the mountains and the rocks, fall on us, and hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb. Now look here, for the great day of his wrath has come. This is immediately after, right here in Luke. But when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, or the abomination of desolation, as Matthew 24:15 says, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains, and I'll get to that in a minute. For these are the days of vengeance, for there will be great distress in the land and wrath upon this people. That is after the middle of the final 7 years. Israel flees into the mountains where it is protected for 1260 days, and I'll show you that in a minute. For these are the days of vengeance. Now take a look here. Let me get back to Revelation 6. And I told you I would show you this. And the stars of heaven fell to the earth. Okay? Did you know that stars is often referenced in the Bible as angels? We all know that. So I'm going to go back here to Revelation 12, and this is really where I was starting. I was just going to show you a lot of this to lead up to this. Revelation 12 is talking about the sign appearing in heaven, and a woman clothed with the sun with the moon under her feet. Then, being with child, she cried out in labor and pain to give birth. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great fiery red dragon. This is Satan, having 7 heads and 10 horns. His tail drew a third of the stars of heaven and threw them to the earth. This is the same thing we are talking about here in Revelation 6, okay? Revelation 6. And the stars of heaven fell to the earth. And I'll prove that in a minute here. I'll show you. And the dragon stood before the woman who was ready to give birth. This woman has not given birth yet, right here. She's ready to give birth. Okay, she is in labor. She is in pain, travailing in pain right now. And Satan is there to devour her child as soon as it was born. And then look, she bore a male child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. Now, I have a theory on this, but I'm not going to talk about that just yet. I will in a second here. And her child was caught up to God in his throne. Caught up right here, I just want to show you. Look at the concordance of caught up, and you'll all agree. Caught up, this is the harpazo. It's the same word that's used in Thessalonians. So anyway, the harpazo, we're talking about the harpazo, right? That's the catching up. That's what it says here in Revelation chapter 12. And it says, and her child was caught up, the harpazo, caught up by force is what that means. And to God in his throne. The child, Christ is the head of the church, and the body is the body of Christ. Okay, the head and the body go together. All right. Now, I was saying I had a theory on this. She bore a male child who was to rule all nations. This, number one, she gave birth to a male child. This male child is Christ is the head and the body is the church. Okay? The fact that this child is born means that it's the end of the age. It's the end. That child has come to life, has full life. It's fresh. It's new. Right? And then it says, who was to rule all nations. This is talking about a future event. So this is a theory I have. She bore a male child, so she gave birth to the child who was fully ready to be born. Okay? And then who was to rule all nations, right? The child was caught up to God in his throne. This is talking about the rapture of the church. I believe this, and I'll show you why. Then the woman fled into the wilderness, where she had a place prepared for by God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days, right? So we know this is the last 3.5 years.